November 27th, 1996, the night before Thanksgiving. A white van sits motionless in bumper-to-bumper traffic on a Seattle highway. Inside, three men frantically search through bags containing just over $1 million in stolen cash. A flashlight beam sweeps back and forth inside the van, visible to the police cruisers now quietly surrounding them. The most prolific bank robber in Seattle history, a man who had eluded the FBI for 5 years, was about to be undone by holiday rush hour traffic. They called him the Hollywood Bandit, and his final act would be worthy of a movie, just not the kind he had in mind. William Scott Scurlock was born on March 5, 1955. By the time he reached his 30s, he had settled in the Pacific Northwest, a region that would become both his playground and his hunting ground. Scurlock was, by most accounts, charismatic and sociable. He moved easily through Seattle's social circles, presenting himself as someone living a comfortable, unconventional life. Few suspected where his money actually came from. What set Scurlock apart from every other bank robber in the Pacific Northwest was his craft. He used Hollywood-quality theatrical makeup, wigs, and prosthetics to transform his appearance before every robbery. Each disguise was so convincing that bank surveillance cameras captured what appeared to be entirely different people. The FBI couldn't even confirm it was the same man committing the robberies until patterns in behavior emerged. Scurlock was reportedly inspired by the 1991 film Point Break, a story of adrenaline-fueled criminals who robbed banks wearing disguises. For Scurlock, the line between cinema and reality had evidently blurred. He did not work alone. His accomplices, Stephen Myers and Mark Biggins, served as lookouts and getaway drivers. Together, the trio operated across the Seattle area for years with what seemed like impunity. Between 1992 and 1996, Scurlock and his accomplices carried out at least 18, possibly 19 bank robberies across the Seattle area. The total haul was estimated at over $2 million. The FBI dubbed the unknown suspect Hollywood, a nod to the extraordinary quality of his disguises. Each robbery featured a different look, different hair, different skin tone, sometimes a different apparent age entirely. The pattern was consistent. A lone figure in disguise would enter a bank, demand cash, and leave quickly. The operations were disciplined and methodical. No unnecessary confrontation, in and out. What made the Hollywood Bandit case so frustrating for investigators was the disguises. Traditional identification methods were rendered useless. Every witness described a different person. The robberies escalated. Early scores were relatively modest, but as the years went on, the amounts grew larger. The confidence of the operation swelling with each success. And then came the final score. November 27, 1996, the night before Thanksgiving. The target was a Seafirst Bank branch in Seattle's Lake City neighborhood. Scurlock entered in disguise and walked out with just over $1 million. Reportedly the single largest cash haul from a bank robbery in the region. It should have been the perfect exit. But inside that bag of cash, hidden among the bundled bills, was something Scurlock hadn't counted on. A bank manager had quietly slipped an electronic tracking device into the money during the robbery. For years, the FBI and Seattle police had been hunting the Hollywood Bandit through the Puget Sound Violent Crimes Task Force. Despite extensive surveillance footage, the disguises made identification nearly impossible. Investigators had identified behavioral patterns, the timing, the geography, the type of bank targeted. But a face? They had dozens, none of them real. The breakthrough strategy came from the banking side. Seattle area banks were advised to place electronic tracking devices inside any stolen cash. It was a countermeasure designed for exactly this kind of case. On Thanksgiving Eve, when Scurlock walked into the Seafirst Bank in Lake City, a quick-thinking bank manager acted. While the robbery was underway, the manager covertly placed an electronic tracker inside the bag of stolen cash. Then came a second stroke of fortune. A customer inside the bank followed the robbers outside and noted the description of their getaway vehicle. That information was relayed to police immediately. The trio switched vehicles after leaving the bank, transferring the stolen cash into a white van. They believed they had shaken any pursuit, but the tracker was already broadcasting their location. And then the one variable no criminal can plan for intervened: Thanksgiving Eve traffic. The busiest travel evening of the American year. The white van crawled to a stop and stayed there. Stuck in traffic with over $1 million and a hidden tracker they couldn't find, the suspects began to panic. Inside the van, they used a flashlight to search through the cache, hunting for whatever was giving away their position. The moving flashlight was visible from outside. Police officers, already tracking the signal, spotted the suspicious activity inside the white van and moved to surround it in the gridlocked traffic. A confrontation erupted between the suspects and police. Myers and Biggins were wounded and captured. Approximately $1 million was recovered from the van, but Scurlock, the mastermind, escaped on foot into the night. With their accomplices now in custody, investigators had what they had lacked for 5 years: names. One of the captured men provided information that led police directly to Scott Scurlock. Scurlock had hidden overnight in a stationary camper in Seattle's Ravenna neighborhood. By Thanksgiving morning, police had located him and surrounded the vehicle. On November 28, 1996, Thanksgiving Day, with police surrounding the camper and no possibility of escape, Scott Scurlock took his own life. The Hollywood Bandit's 5-year run was over. With Scurlock dead, the case against his accomplices moved forward. Stephen Myers and Mark Biggins faced federal charges for their roles in the bank robbery spree that had terrorized Seattle's banking community for years. Both men were convicted. They had served as lookouts and getaway drivers across the multi-year robbery campaign, facilitating what amounted to over $2 million in stolen bank funds. Myers and Biggins were each sentenced to 21 years in federal prison. For two men who had spent years driving getaway cars, they would now be going nowhere for a very long time. The case laid bare an uncomfortable irony. Scurlock had spent years perfecting disguises that no investigator could see through. In the end, it wasn't forensics or facial recognition that caught him. It was a bank manager, a concerned customer, and Thanksgiving traffic. Stephen Myers was released from federal custody in 2013. Mark Biggins followed about 2 years later in 2015. Both had served the bulk of their sentences. Scurlock himself never faced trial. He never sat in a courtroom. He never heard a verdict. The Hollywood Bandit story ended not with justice delivered by a jury, but with a choice he made alone in a camper on Thanksgiving morning. The Hollywood Bandit case became one of the most studied bank robbery investigations in Pacific Northwest history. It demonstrated both the limits and the eventual triumph of persistent, methodical police work. The role of the bank manager who placed the tracker and the customer who followed the suspects outside became a reminder that ordinary people sometimes play decisive roles in extraordinary cases. Scurlock's story was revisited in the 2024 Netflix documentary How to Rob a Bank, introducing a new generation to the case. The absurd final act, a $1 million getaway foiled by holiday traffic, proved irresistible to storytellers. The case also raised questions about glorification. Scurlock's lifestyle and theatrical flair made him a compelling character, but behind the disguises were real victims. Bank employees who lived through moments of genuine terror. In the end, the Hollywood Bandit spent years crafting the perfect disguise. But no amount of theatrical makeup could disguise the one thing that mattered most: a white van sitting perfectly still in Thanksgiving traffic. Scott Scurlock evaded identification through at least 18 bank robberies over 5 years. He was ultimately undone in a single evening by a bank manager's courage, a customer's vigilance, and the one adversary no getaway driver can outrun: traffic. A new case drops every day. Subscribe so you never miss one.